Hello and welcome to a Five&Co podcast. Today we're going to be talking about communication, and every leader that we work with needs to be a great communicator. And I thought today I would get alongside a very good friend in Mark, who does communication for a living. So Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Well, Tim, thanks for inviting me on. I'm a TV presenter and reporter for the BBC in Yorkshire. I work for a programme called Look North, and we cover the TV news in Yorkshire. And it's the most watched TV news programme in this county, the biggest county in the country. And I get to go out and about, meet people and tell their stories, and then sit in leads in the studio and present a couple of times a week. It's good fun.
Great. And thank you for joining us today. I'm absolutely fascinated just to pick your brain a little bit around this topic of communication, because I, for one, am filled with dread of the idea of being live on national TV. And you have got to this place now where that's what you do day in, day out. And again, today, as Five&Co, we work with leaders who are regularly asked to public speak. They're asked to give addresses to their teams. They're asked to speak at conferences. And I really thought we could use this as an opportunity just to look at some of those key skills, what's important in communication, and how we help them just to prepare well for those moments of communication.
Sounds good.
So tell me, Mark, how did you become a communication expert?
Well, I think it all goes back to being a child with my three brothers, listening to the radio, listening to sport radio. Back then it was called Talk Radio and Radio 5 before it was even called 5 Live. Me and my brothers were told to go to bed, but instead we'd put the radio underneath our covers and listen to the late night chats about the latest goings on in the Premier League, as it had just become the Premier League. Okay. And I got this real enthusiasm for radio, and then I started DJing, running a mobile disco business, and that from the age of 14 I had to get the confidence to be able to speak in front of lots of people and tell them what music was going on, sing happy birthday, that sort of thing. And then building on that, I then ended up working in radio, having done a degree in broadcast journalism, and then I made the transition to TV about 15 years ago. So yeah, it's I've gradually sort of built my skills and my experience, and I'm still nervous before we go on air live, and you need a bit of nerves. I think it's a good thing, but I also get a thrill from it.
Brilliant. So just as we dive into that, and I want to push in a little bit around how we prepare ourselves for communication, then what's important for the audience. But let me start with that preparation point. You alluded it to there. You get nervous beforehand. What do you do before going live on TV?
I think about what's the worst that can happen.
Okay, so you catastrophize.
But also thinking, look, what the worst thing that can happen is I stumble over my words and I pick up and I carry on. Well, the worst thing did happen about a month ago. My autocue failed when I was presenting.
Okay.
And it was the end of a very long shift. I started early in the morning. I presented the breakfast bulletins, and then I was presenting the lunch bulletin on Look North, and the autocue failed, and I had to just busk it.
Wow.
And so the worst happened, and it was fine. As my cameraman liked to say, nobody died. So we deal with what is happening, and we carry on. And we don't, if you make a mistake, the key thing is not to obsess about the mistake. People watching know it's live TV, so they accept that things can happen, and you move on and you carry on, and you don't let it throw you. And that would be probably the most important thing I try and remind myself. I also use breathing techniques such as box breathing, so breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, that sort of thing, which does help. If I'm feeling particularly nervous, it's a really big story, so I'm live at the scene of I've covered sort of terrorist attacks, I've covered massive football matches, I've covered flooding, everything in between, and both out on location and in the studio presenting. When I'm presenting, I've got an autocue, or not when it fails. And then when I'm out and about, I'm kind of making up as I go along with some notes hidden, for example, on paper like this, just a way in case I need them.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's so true. I think I see, and I can be victim of this as well. We trip ourselves up, don't we? We think that if I stutter too much, or if I forget my lines, that's actually means that the whole communication has not been a good piece of communication. But the flip of that, what is important in communication? What is it that people hear when we communicate?
I think what people are looking for, what engages people, I should say, is hearing a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you've got to hold their hand through this story. And if you take them off on a tangent at any point, you potentially lose them. Okay. So when I'm telling a story, Sarah mentioned there about, say, flooding in South Yorkshire, as we've had several times over the last 10 years, I'll be telling them, I'll be explaining what's happened and the impact of that, and then what's happening next. So you've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're holding their hand through that journey. We as humans love stories. That's why our children love hearing us read them stories. We've been doing it since the beginning of time around a campfire. And that's what I think we're all doing, whether I'm presenting on the TV or whether a leader is talking to their staff. I think that you've got to take them with you, and you can't use language that they're not understand, for example, okay. And you can't go off on tangents and talk about a wildfire when you're actually talking about flooding. You've got to keep it on subject. Tell one story and tell it well.
Okay. So there's an element there of stripping back the communication to the key message. Is that what I'm hearing? That the simplicity almost of what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah. Think hard about what it is you want to get across. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't try and, have one priority where possible rather than having several. And I think that then you'll get your message across, because people can only take in so much. If you listen to football managers, they often talk about this. When they're in the dressing room at half time, they have one message or one or two, very simple messages, because if they throw too much at the players, it will just go over their heads. So it's the same whether, when I'm telling my stories on the TV, I've got to tell my story and I've got to tell it as well as possible in clear, simple language, short sentences, for example.
I think we, all of us, see presentations day in, day out, and we talk about death by PowerPoints, but I think you're right. We see a lot of information being transferred through presenting and stuff. But what you're saying here, in essence, that it's actually what is the key narrative, the key story point, and reinforce that. Would you suggest that when we communicate from the front like that we should be making the same point multiple times?
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting question. And actually in our industry, there's a bit of a debate, because sometimes colleagues and maybe even viewers get a bit frustrated because you'll see the presenter saying, telling us the key part of the story. So there's been a wildfire in North Yorkshire. It's been burning for 24 hours and there are 10 fire engines on the scene. And then it throws live to the reporter and they just regurgitate what you've already heard. So I personally believe that, yes, there's no harm in reiterating it as long as you say it in a different way.
Okay.
If you're literally saying, 5 people have died, and then the reporter picks up 5 people have died. So I would think about how you can communicate the same message but in a different way. Yes, I would. Obviously, politicians use repetition a lot. Education. Tony Blair famously, and that is effective. But that's kind of repeating the message at the same time, if you will, rather than going back to it. So, yeah, I think beginning, middle, and end, and then I guess you can go back to the key message at the end. But at the end, I'm always looking as a listener, as a viewer. I think what we need to hear is what's happening next. What is the take home from this message? And I think that's what I'm always trying to think about when I'm telling a story.
Okay. So almost having the end in mind as such in the way that you communicate that.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us a little bit, Mark, because for someone like yourself, and the journey for you started at age 14, but communication is definitely a skill. So a lot of people think that people are naturally much better communicators, and obviously there is an element of that. At Five&Co, we spend a lot of time looking at personality differences and aspects like this. But I think we're both in agreement that we can learn to be excellent communicators. How did you learn to be an excellent communicator? And perhaps what are some of the things that all the rest of us can learn from that?
I think you're right. I think we can learn these skills, and they're such valuable skills to have, being able to communicate, because that is what we do. That's what successful humans do. We communicate effectively. And I was lucky in that my state school back home in Oxfordshire, we were made to all in year 7, so aged about 12, do a speech for 5 minutes about a subject that we were interested in.
Okay.
I was always interested in Roald Dahl, so I did a speech about Roald Dahl. I won in my class, and then the winners of each class went to the year group, and we had to do our speech in front of the year group, and I won the year group. So I won it, and I distinctly remember giving that talk at my school and thinking, wow, like I can do this. And then because I did that, then I got invited to do other speeches about like awards, like GCSE awards. Then I was elected the head boy. So almost like success breeds success.
Mm-hmm.
And but it wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't like I really want to be good at communicating, or I aspire to be good at that, or I think I am good at that. I didn't really think that. I kind of just fell into it. And then I guess the more you do, the better you get. So the more DJing I did, talking on the mic, small things like, pizzas and chips are now ready, help yourself at the corner, in front of the microphone as a teenager, and then going from there. But it's also making mistakes. I've made mistakes in my broadcasting and learned from them and thought about how can I do that better. And watching myself back, I think that's a really key skill.
That's something that we often cringe at, isn't it? The idea of like watching yourself back on camera, but that's something that you think is really helpful to do.
I would highly recommend watching yourself back. I think if you're giving a presentation or if you're on the telly and you've got the opportunity to watch it back, it's been recorded, you learn so much. And Chris Mason, the political editor for the BBC, who I was very lucky to have training from when I was just starting out in radio, back at Radio Derby many years ago, he told me, watch yourself back, Mark, and make sure you remember your best live, because I used to be the live reporter for Radio Derby, the best live report is never as good as you think it is, and the worst is never as bad. And it's very true. And I learned a lot from watching myself back. And I still do it now. I watch when I present, I watch it back. I bore my children and my wife to tears watching myself back, and I ask them to give me some feedback as well, because I think you want to hear an outsider's perspective. And there's always things you can do, because it can feel a bit unnatural being live on the telly, and we're trying to make it. We're trying to allow the viewer in, create that connection. So when I say hello and goodbye, I really smile and I really want that connection. I mean, somebody emailed in recently to the BBC's inbox and said, "Who's the new smiley presenter?" And I was really chuffed, because that's good. That's what I want. I want them to feel that connection with me as a presenter.
You've picked up on a few things there, which I think are quite interesting. One is energy and enthusiasm, so actually smiling, etc. These are things that sometimes I think we can overlook in presenting, but it sounds like that's become something that's been quite important. And then again, it is that ability just to observe. Now, for many of us in our day jobs, we're not live on TV, so we can't go back and watch what we saw on telly earlier. But how do we get that feedback? Is it a case of asking for people to give us that feedback? Is there other things that we can do? I think asking trusted colleagues for feedback is a really sensible thing to do. It's really hard, isn't it, when you're to be objective about yourself? It's actually really difficult. So asking for other people to let you know how they feel you're doing is I think is a really good thing to do. And I suppose that this whole subject is all about engaging people and relating to people, and that's what we're trying to do when I'm broadcasting, when I'm telling stories. That's what I'm trying to do. But it's not just relevant for TV or radio. This is relevant, across the board. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, and we talk a lot with leaders in our coaching, in our one-to-ones, around the power of communication. Just broadly, that question: what is the power of communication? It's everything. It's everything, because if you're trying to sell something or sell a message, you're not going to be able to sell that without communication. If you look at the most successful politicians, wherever they are in the world, they are extremely skilled. You might not agree with their politics, but you can look at the way that they communicate, the simple messages that people can relate to, speaking in language that people can understand and relate to. I think that's key, because for example, when I interview academics, I often say, please, try without patronising them, I sort of ask them to speak in a way that people in the pub would understand, and I think that's key. That's key for everyone, because we've so often language is used which is
we can't take in or understand, and so we've got to use simple language. Obviously, it's particularly relevant to me and my job because we want everyone to understand what's being said. But I think it's relevant elsewhere as well, across the board.
Yeah, thank you. What do you think are some of the pitfalls in the way that people communicate? What are the common mistakes that people see? And you will have seen it in your profession, and the people who make it and the people who don't, almost.
Well, the key one that I see time and time again is people not using the microphone properly.
Oh, okay.
So
better lean in.
Yes, exactly. There's the problem put the microphone right in your mouth and then you can't really hear what they're saying, and it's what's called over-modding, which is, you can't hear what they're saying. Or they might have the microphone too far away and you can't hear what they're saying. Or they might be speaking and then the microphone's over here, but they've turned their mouth over there, so you can't hear what they're saying. It's the biggest probably bugbear of mine, you could probably tell, is people's misuse of the microphone. Okay. Microphones are great because it allows everyone to hear, and you can't just assume people can hear. There are plenty of people with hearing difficulties in this world, and it's really useful for them to use a microphone. So where possible, I'd encourage people to do that. But just make sure you've got it close, but not too close to your mouth when you're trying to send a message, I guess, when you're trying to communicate. That would be the key one. But also going back to what I said earlier, like telling one message clearly, it would be my other bugbear. And I've written down here another thing that's important is eye contact. Okay. Eye contact. So engaging people with your eyes. When I interview people, I ask them to take their sunglasses and their caps or hats off, and invariably they do that because I explain, if you want to create a connection with the audience, we need to see your eyes. That's the most important thing. This is what you're drawn to when you're watching the TV, your eyes. So engage people with your eyes, look at them, engage them if you can. And finally, if you can, prepare, because I do think preparing, I know I have to broadcast live and I have to talk off the top of my head, but even then, even if it's just me thinking when I'm being introduced by the presenter out on a big breaking story, I'm still preparing in my head, right, what am I going to say at the beginning? What can I say in the middle? And what can I say at the end?
Thanks, Mark. I think there's some really interesting things that we probably, again, most of us aren't professional communicators like you, but there's some practical things there that we sometimes forget about. So I think the quality of making sure that everyone can hear you, for a start, I think I see that people presenting from the front at conferences, etc., and just simple things. The sounds not done well, and just how we engage with the audience. I know for me personally, in facilitating and delivering, I've been encouraged recently by my colleague Tim to step forward to walk in front of the parapet as such, and eyeball people like you were just saying there as a really strong communication technique.
I was going to say absolutely, and I don't know whether you've ever used humour in your.
I'm just not that funny, Mark.
That's not true. I know that for a fact. That's not true. You're a very funny man. But humour can also be good. It can also ease the tension. Mm-hmm. It can engage people. It can, if you can make them smile. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about risky humour at all or anything to swear. There's nothing like that. But if you can engage people with a bit of humour, it could be something simple. Us Brits are experts in the weather. You can make a joke about the weather, for example, to start off.
What about? Can I just challenge it? Because some people think that's just not me. I'm just not funny, And we, I think with a fixed mindset, we kind of put that sort of stuff on ourselves. How does somebody who knows that they're, not naturally, that doesn't come natural to them, how do they approach that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you want to come across as yourself. You've got to be genuine. You if you're pretending to be something you're not, then you can kind of see that. Often, I'd say. I think again, it's that preparation word. It's thinking about, well, what's happening at this conference that I'm speaking at that is mildly amusing. Is there something that you can pick up on? You might be the first session of the day and people are still sort of waking up, or you might be the last session, so you're going to try and you could make a joke of the fact that, right, I know this is the last session of the day and this is the time that most people start to nod off, but no, stay with me because I'm gonna this is what I'm going to tell you. This story, a beginning, a middle, and end, and then you take it away. And like you said, I'm interested to hear this idea of walking out in front of the stage to engage the people that are watching. I think that's a clever idea of just mixing up and making it, oh, this is a bit different. Oh, I'm going to watch this one.
Yeah, and I think there's something around, we haven't talked about this yet, but the pace that we speak. And would you recommend that we change the pace throughout the talk? You know, do you slow down to make points? These are things that I probably intuitively think, but is that how we can communicate really effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to, when we're telling stories, when we're communicating. When I say telling stories, all I'm talking about is communicating, talking. By varying the pace and the pitch and using silence, you really do engage people. And it's something I've learned over time. Like when I'm recording what we call a voiceover, which is the audio that we record on a TV package, we will use silence, for example, if it's Remembrance Sunday, we'll let the silence. I'll use up to 5 seconds of silence, and the shots of the different people standing in silence, remembering the people who've lost their lives at war, to tell the story, and the viewer will be engaged because silence is like, oh, what's gone silent? Why is that? And there are some broadcasters who are particularly skilled at using silence to tell stories, and actually to encourage the person they're interviewing to say more. So yeah, I'd encourage people to think about where they can vary their pitch and their pace. Adjectives and adverbs are good because, I've learned over the years that if you can say it's an extremely sad day for the people of Barnsley as they pay tribute to the Dickie Bird who's died at the age of 92. So you're focusing on extremely, because that's the word that people can be drawn into. It's not just a sad day. This is a really sad day. This is one of the most famous Yorkshiremen who's passed away. It's his funeral coming up. That sort of thing. So I'm looking at my script and thinking, well, which words can I emphasise?
That's really interesting. And because I think it takes a bit of courage actually to put silence in our talks, to make a point and then pause for 5 seconds. Let's just try it. You did it. But this idea that that we carefully, just in the preparation then for a talk, do you think we should be very mindful of putting like this I really want to emphasize this point, so this is where I'm going to slow it down, this is where I'm going to pause?
Absolutely. So, for example, at the end of a talk, you might say, if there's one thing I want you to take home with you today, it's this. X, whatever it is you want to say. You're leaving that silence. You're really reiterating the point. And with preparation, we talked a lot about it. If you're able to go into the space, if you're not familiar with the space where you're giving a talk, say a presentation, if you can get in there beforehand. Do you ever do that when you're doing your presentations? Because you do a lot of this. Do you go into the space, into the lecture hall, or to scope it out, to test the mics, to feel at home in that area?
Definitely in the setup of the room, definitely go and get a lie of like, how do I want people to be seated? Where do we want people positioned? And sometimes that's outside of your control, isn't it? But where I can control that is helpful. But sound less so, actually, and that's something that I will take away for sure from this conversation, of just really thinking about, if people can't hear me well, then communication's lost from the start.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. I think we can draw this in a little bit, Mark. Just and I suppose almost in your own in the theme of this conversation, what's the one or two key things that you think people should take away? We've touched on a number of things, but just as a summary for us.
Okay, so I would summarise by saying, think hard about the message that you want to get across. Can you distill it into one message? Because if you can, that will be the most effective way at communicating your message and making sure that the people you're talking to will take that away from them. Is there a beginning, a middle, and an end you can think about? Take them on a journey. Hold their hand through the story. and this comes then back to preparation. And finally, we talked about eye contact. That's really important. Another thing I would encourage people to think about is their body language. We communicate a huge amount through our bodies. The way I'm using my hands now, we don't realize it, but actually standing up and smiling and yes, thank you, well done. I often think that actually sometimes when I'm presenting, the director will say in my ear, "Mark, you're slouching," and I'm like, "Oh, my mum wouldn't like that. Sit up straight." But our body language is really important. So smiling, engaging people with your eyes, and just trying to relate to people. Think about how also, if you were them, how would you best communicate this message? Try and take yourself out of yourself, if you will, and be one of your colleagues who's hearing this message, and think hard about how I can communicate this. And I know in all of this, sometimes we have to make presentations or talks out of the blue about something which we may not know a huge amount about. But the more, even in that time, you can still do some preparation. So preparing is always essential. Even if you've got a minute to prepare, use that time wisely.
Thank you. Yeah, I think people go two ways, don't they? They either over prepare and almost that they get themselves in a bit of it becomes quite a stressful situation, or they don't prepare enough, so they think, "Oh, I'll be fine. I'll just turn up. I'll just wing it." And I think what you're saying there is trying to balance those two things.
Balance the two, and I would encourage you to think about not word for word what you're going to say. I actually think that's a bad idea, and I think you could end up over preparing. But having some bullet points, having some notes that you can refer to, if you need to, you could have them in your pocket and then just think, "Oh yeah, those are the key points I want to get across." There's no harm in glancing down at your notes. Nobody's going to if you momentarily look, that's absolutely fine. It's the sort of thing I do in job interviews, actually. I have some notes on me, not just a few pointers, and just to make sure. And I'll even say to people who interview me, "Can I just check that I've got across everything I wanted to?" Yeah, okay. There's one other point I wanted to say, for example.
Yeah, really good, really good. And as I say, as you've said a couple of times here, it's not those awkward moments that people remember from the talk. It's actually the key points you want to communicate get heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of the book, The Chimp Paradox. I don't know if you've read it.
Okay, yeah, I have, yeah. Great book.
What I love about that book is that what I took from it is that your best is more than good enough. So if you can, I can't be my really experienced colleague who's been at the BBC for 30 years and is an absolute whiz at doing lives or editing packages. What I can be is the best I can be, and the best I can be is more than good enough. So as long as I do the best I can, that's great. And if I make a mistake, not to, like I said earlier, not to obsess about the mistake, to realize this is communication. We make little ums and ahs, stutters. We might say the wrong word. We can correct ourselves and we can move on, and that's absolutely fine. Shows that it's live, So and people relate to it. Actually, sometimes when I make mistakes, people think it's funny and they relate to it. Think, "Oh, well, he is human after all. He's not a robot," So it's fine to make a mistake. It's how we learn.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And just listening to you, actually, it's almost inspired me to think when I'm next got a public speaking event or something, just some of these tips that you're giving, and particularly in that preparation and mindset and engaging with the room. I just want to just to wrap this up, just to say that if you have got a public speaking engagement coming up, or if this is a skill that you particularly would like to develop, please get in touch with us. We'd love to support you in your personal development related to this topic. And I just want to thank Mark again. Thank you, Mark, so much. Just to say to the viewers, Mark is kind of like a minor celebrity in the area. He's the sort of celebrity that people kind of recognize him, but they don't know where from. That's the kind of level of celebrity.
Yeah, I met you before, haven't I? It's like, well, it sounds very like I'm bragging when I say you've probably seen me on the TV. But yes, that does happen in the supermarkets and out and about on the bus and things. But it's lovely, the feedback is in person, at least, maybe not on social media, but in person is very positive, and it's lovely. I'm interested in people's lives and telling their stories, and yeah, it's a compliment when people say they enjoy the work that I do.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to be going away with a couple of things myself that I really want to take away from that. So like you already said, just the preparation, the body language, the eye contact, the pace that we pitch our communication at, and just the way that we engage our audience, and almost letting go of the stutters, the bits where it didn't go quite as well, that's okay, that's not necessarily ruined my communication, and so almost just that myself is good enough.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.